Welcome to the Floyd Norgaard Cultural Center. I'm Rose King, and I'm going to show you a little bit about our building that we're under construction in the midst of painting, but we'll have some fun. So come on with me. This gives you a little bit information about the public hall. Talks a little bit about the history of the Floyd Norgaard Center, and we're going to take you upstairs. This whole area now is done with little vignettes, so you can see the different things that are important in Stanwood. It starts with 1873 in Centerville, which was Stanwood was originally called. And in 1877, D.O. Pearson came, and you were just at the D.O. Pearson house. There were too many Centervilles, so when D.O. was postmaster, he was asked to change the name, and he chose his wife's maiden name. And that's how we got the name Stanwood. This man right here, Dr. McEachran, was the first medical doctor in Stanwood, and we were lucky enough to get all his supplies. Another important part to the development of Stanwood was the Klondike Gold Rush in 1898. It says 50 people from the Stanwood area went up to the gold rush. Some became rich from gold, others by supplying supplies. I think the funniest story is a story of Billy Bates, who was a boxer, a prize fighter. And if he was the champion up there, and after the matches, people would throw gold dust into his platform where he was, and so he scooped it up and came home with quite a bit of money. This is a fun little thing that we've got. This is called the Perfection Oven. So you would light your kerosene here, and then once that got going, enough flame, you would take this box, put it on top, and use it as like an oven. In October 1904, the cow campaign began a hot issue to limit the amount of cows that were roaming the streets and in people's gardens. So that should the cows have their way or not? That was the big question. So of course, Camino Island has an important part of our history of Stanwood area and the resorts. There was over 15 different resorts in the 40s and the 50s. And people would come from Seattle. It was a big trip to come up from Seattle for the week or the weekend. We also have an exhibit here about our military, tied in with our Veterans Memorial on the outside. This is the hands-on room. This is where we get the kids to come up and actually touch and feel and experience and let their imaginations go.
Well, hello, I'm Richard Hanks, and I'm president of the Stanwood Area Historical Society. And we're now in the main hall, the lower floor of the old building, the Floyd Norgaard Cultural Center. And where we're standing right now used to be a complete stage. We do have a large picture on the wall that kind of demonstrates that. And this was known as the Opera House for many, many years. The building itself was built in 1902. It consisted of 2 floors at that time, one you've already seen upstairs with the exhibits. And this is the one downstairs. This is where they would also rent out the facilities for concerts, for all kinds of different traveling shows. We had minstrel programs in here. We had soprano singers from Norway. We had all kinds of, there was even the Jolly Entertainers out of Des Moines, who were a bunch of orphans that came up and they learned how to play instruments and they raised money that way. We had Chautauqua speakers coming in here. We had boxing matches, we had wrestling matches, we had half-court basketball games. And many of these things were kind of recorded on the walls that we have in the cloakroom and in the old ticket booth. We found it was used for storage for about 15 years. When we cleaned everything out, they had written on the walls. They had signed the walls when they came. There was even this Victor Murdoch, who was a firebrand Kansas progressive, who showed up. Eddie Lawson, his father, was the bridge tender for the bridge that went over when the original bridges across the West Pass of the Stillaguamish River. And he was here, and Al's Dance Band is written several times. So clearly they were very excited about Al's Dance Band being here. That was an important event. And you can imagine these kids that were in here, they might have been working a little bit, maybe taking tickets, doing those kinds of things. You know, Eddie wrote his name more than once This one is Eddie Lawson, March 3rd, 1933. So you almost can feel the excitement that people were having when they were in there and things were going on in the main hall, and they were just so excited about being here. We have football scores and baseball scores that are tagged onto the walls in the cloakroom and in the ticket booth. So that becomes living history. That becomes part of the whole building, that, you know, this is the enthusiasm that was here for this particular building for so long. The floors in here were redone in 1922. So the original 1902 floors would be underneath this. These are 1922 floors. They're kind of have a different patina, if you will. Over the years, when this was used as a warehouse for about 70 years, a lot of those stains got into the wood, but these are fir floors that were done at that time. The kind of stenciling that we have along the top of the walls here, we have an original piece that we kept in place to show people what that was like, and then an artist had to come in and to duplicate another portion of that. We're not quite sure what the balcony was for. We're not quite sure. It could have been used for, I would think, musicians or something like that, to be raised above the floor. Because there were a lot of dances and concerts and stage plays from the drama club. Now, the original hall was built by men who at one time had been part of the Independent Order of American Foresters. They started a fraternal organization, a fraternal association, or a foresters association, and they're the ones that put this together in 1902. Many of those men, though, went on after that. They didn't stay in one place. And so about 4 years later, in 1906, the building went bankrupt and it was put on a sheriff's auction, and that was sold to a man named Anton Anderson, who you may be familiar with. The Anderson Cemetery is named after that family. And 2 years later, the Independent Order of Oddfellows purchased it in 1908, and that's when they began their stand here, and they would own it all the way up until 1939. And they sold it to Ed Bryant, who had a hardware store near here. He uses it for a warehouse, basically. And thanks to a generous donation by the Norgaard family around 2000, the Historical Society was able to purchase it and begin restoration of this building. It is a unique building. There just isn't one that has this much floor space and that has the ability to really hold the kind of events that we have. It was the community hall for many places. As I've written before, this is really where the community character was developed. People learned, they laughed, they were able to get together, they were able to really, associate as a community here. And that's what I think is so important about this building. That's a little bit of the background of what the building is about, and I would hope that everybody would join in and help us participate to save this.